What's up, guys? I hope we are good. We are going to be running through a Q&A, and I've actually just decided to hit a bit of shoulders and arms in my natural habitat, my office slash place with some dumbbells. And yeah, there's been loads of good questions, so we're just going to bang through them and see if everyone gets some more in-depth answers. And if you have any more questions, you can chuck those down below. But let's get to the first one. So Fazil has asked how to ease the transition from junior slash youth up to Colts slash seniors. So let's get a quick pump on before we answer that, but that's a good one. Oh, it gets hot in here when you got the window shut, trying to keep out all the sound. But one of the biggest things that you've got to think about when you're making that transition is, you're essentially playing against adults, and the biggest difference, not necessarily going to be in the skill, in the fitness, sometimes even in the speed, but the strength and the size and the resilience. So, how big are you? How strong are you? How much muscle have you got? Usually, these are some of the main questions that I ask and the things that we think about when you're making that transition. And honestly, it gets to that point where you may have been relying or been able to rely on your skills and your fitness potentially when you were playing at Colts, when you were playing at youth and juniors, but now you're making that transition up. You cannot afford not to, because if you are going into these collisions with like 10, 20, 30 kilos less size than some of these other opponents, you're going to be putting yourself at a higher injury risk. So that would be the number one priority, if I'm honest. But look, the fact that you're asking these kind of questions already, these are the right kind of questions. So you're obviously taking it serious. Now, does that mean I then expect you to only focus on the strength and size? No, you want something well-rounded. You want something for speed, strength, power, and fitness. But usually the biggest deficit between the adults and some of the juniors or the younger players is just that strength and that size. So that's something you've got to continually develop all the way through. So have a look at that. Okay, our next question is, what do you think about 1 minute on, 2 minutes off for fitness for rugby? So that is a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio. Now, rugby is probably closer towards like 1-to-4, so it's not even like rugby specific in that regard. I tend to prefer working on either ends of the spectrum. Okay, so you've got extremely high amounts of work with minimal rest, or no rest if you're doing something continuously, like zone 2 or steady state cardio, that might be just 30 minutes of work non-stop at a lower intensity. Then you might have your completely anaerobic, maximal rest. It's not conditioning necessarily. You're thinking about the cardio system, but your strength training, your jumps, your power, your speed, where you're doing a very short burst, sometimes just a few seconds or 1 rep or 10 meters, and then backing it up with maximal rest. So, sometimes those are a 1-to-10 work to rest ratio. So can you work in the middle? Yeah, absolutely. I do not spend too much time working in the middle. I like doing 4 minutes of hard or high intensity work followed by 3 minutes of rest. But again, that's it's not that 1-to-2 work rest ratio. Will you get somewhere doing 1-to-2 work rest ratio? Yeah, absolutely. But you'll probably hit a bit of a ceiling, and it shouldn't be the only area that you're focusing on. I would spend way more time at the extreme ends of the spectrum and very minimal amount of work in that 1-to-2 kind of range that you've suggested. Is it not going to work? Yeah, it's going to work. Do I recommend it? Is it where the majority of my conditioning training for myself and for my athletes is? No, it's not. So hopefully that answers it. But yeah, it's all right, but it's not the best. Right, let's hit some laterals. So one of my 1-to-1 athletes, Eric, you already know about the stats because I have that all outlaid for all of my athletes, but wants me to talk a little bit more about specific targets and stats and rough areas to aim for and what it actually means. How important is it? So look, when you're doing targets like these, you should be able to squat this much, or run for this far, or run this fast. Everybody's massively individual. Even at the elite level, and even between the same positions, there'll be a big difference because there can be different play styles, right? You have your super heavier, slower wingers, or your super light and your faster wingers, for example. Fact of the matter is, you need skills and you need the physical qualities. I'm not going to pretend like you don't need the skills. I'm here as a strength and conditioning coach saying how important the technical and the tactical side of the rugby is. However, if you are not hitting certain minimum targets, because rugby is just such a physical sport, you are going to be holding yourself back tremendously. And so I do like some minimum targets. And this does not mean that if you're not hitting them already, you're a bad player, you're not going to get anywhere. But it does mean that you need to work on it. And everybody can hit these, so you should be aiming towards them. So an example of this would be, for males, this is for pretty much across all ages, because if you're below this and you're younger, it's something to be working up towards. But I do like to use relative numbers as well, to take into account your body weight. So regardless if you're like a forward or a back, for the strength numbers, we're looking at like 1 to 1.25 times your body weight. As a bench press, we're looking at like 1.5 to 1.7 times your body weight for a back squat. These are 1 rep maxes, by the way. And then trap bar, depending on like the height of the the height of the handles, you're probably looking at like another quarter of your body weight on top as you squat. So it might be like 1.7 times to 2 times your body weight. You can go way higher than these, of course, but they will start to get diminishing returns. I do recommend you keep going after you've gotten to this point, but if you do not have some of these, you know where those weaknesses are and you know where to focus some of that extra time and attention on. The Bronco side of things. If you are above 6 minutes, there is no excuse, okay? Not just for your rugby, for your health. Get that under, whether that's dropping a bit of weight to get down there or just doing more cardio, preferably a combination of both. Everybody can get underneath 6 minutes. Yes, even you props. If you're a back, realistically, if you are above 5 minutes 30, again, you're probably holding back some of that performance. So we've covered the relative strength targets, we've covered some of the fitness. To be honest, I'm not going to run through the speed side of things now, just because it really is heavily dependent on how you're timing it and exactly how it's measured and which position you are, because there will be bigger differences here compared to some of the other positions. But I do recommend that you guys do track some of your sprinting. So look at like a 10, 20, 30 meter sprint time. I like to record it with a camera, and then you can actually measure it from the frame that you start moving to the frame that you cross that finish line. It takes away some of the error that might be associated with doing a stopwatch yourself or somebody else trying to do it, and you can repeatedly remeasure it from the videos themselves. So I think that's a bit of a better idea sometimes. All right, before we get into the next question, we're gonna hit some triceps and tricep extensions. Okay, so our next question is 30 to 50 minutes before rugby lowest training. So I'm going to approach this from 2 angles, because I'm not 100% sure exactly what you mean. We're going to say, can you do 30 to 50 minutes of a session? Is it going to be productive before we go into some kind of rugby training? Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you get a squat in, if you get a hinge in, maybe you get, a couple of jumps, maybe a lunge, you're probably going to be sorted, right? Easily doable in that kind of time frame. If we're talking more from the perspective of, can you do a session 30 to 50 minutes before we go into rugby? Again, yeah, you can. Would it be better if you could split it up a little bit? Yeah, if you could do it early in the morning, and then you've got that time, you got a few meals in you, give your legs a little bit of chance to just rest and recuperate before you go into that training session. That would probably be a bit better. But if we're talking about, in season, when you don't have much opportunity to get the training sessions in any other time, is that going to be better than you skipping it? Yes. For your long-term development, it may, at least when you start doing this for like the first 3 weeks, you might struggle a little bit with soreness, with fatigue, but you will get used to it and the performance will start climbing back up again. So I definitely recommend it if it is your only option. I do tend to try like 2 full body days, like a Monday and a Wednesday, if your training sessions are on Tuesday and Thursday. If you don't have that much time to train and you can't do double sessions, that's probably how I'd split it up. But yeah, it's an option. St. David's Day today, recording this, so big up the Welsh. Thought I'd sport this whilst we go through this. We have one more question. So we're quickly going to get in one last triceps, biceps, and lateral raises before we go into that. And yeah. If we have time, how long should we stay in off-season training? If we have time, to be honest, as long as you possibly can. So, I mean, I guess define what off-season training is. For me, the definition I like to use is there is no consistent training or games, so you've essentially got a free schedule. Amazing. Like, you don't have to worry as much about managing fatigue going into games. You can choose the days that you do stuff, the things that you're focusing on, and that's usually conducive to more progress towards your goals. So as long as you can. Now, what I would say is that doesn't mean only doing weights. Off-season is, to work on what you want when you want. That could be that it's still a speed and fitness focus. It doesn't just mean, 7 days of training in the gym. So bear that in mind if that's what you're actually asking. Think about when your season's starting, when you might have to go into pre-season, because you want to be in a place where you're actually pretty fit and pretty fast and you can move well coming into pre-season, so it doesn't absolutely destroy you and you'll be able to get more out of it. So that might mean, like, let's say you've got a long, like a 12-week long off season. You could do the first 6 weeks bit more of a focus on like your aerobic ability, your strength and your size, and then those next 6 weeks or so, a little bit more of that speed and that fitness focus. Not obviously a complete switch, but just a bit more of it, so when you come into pre-season you can get the most out of it. Okay, so we've actually got one more question that I forgot about, and I actually brought up something to help me talk about this. So this was, I've been talking about ways that you can get more performance out of your training, a lot of nutrition stuff recently, and this was about intra-workout carbs. So easy to digest, quick absorbing carbohydrates that you can use in your workouts that are not going to make you heavy, not going to make you bloated, but they are going to help you get a little bit more out of it, push a bit harder, last a little bit longer. So fruit juice can be a real good option. Orange juice, for example, you can get like isotonic drinks, Gatorade, that have sugars in them anyway, or this specifically, which we'll show up to the screen. Okay, you can't read that, but this is dextrose. So just a simple carb that you can basically just put in. It's kind of a bit like sugar, to be honest. It tastes super sweet, and if you really want to go for it, sometimes I'll even get a bit of electrolytes, a bit of orange juice, scoop of dextrose in there. It's like 30 grams of carbohydrates per scoop, and yeah, feels great. Definitely notice the improvements, and I definitely recommend it. Not all of the time, but if you're feeling like you're gassing out in your sessions, in your matches. So guys, the pump has been secured. The questions have been answered. Hopefully this is a cool format, and we'll get some more questions rolling for the next one, now that I'm going to make this a little bit more of a regular thing, at least every couple of months, every few months, and definitely one specific to each phase of the northern hemisphere season. So if you do have any questions, chuck them down below. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.